Okay, we're live. Hello, ladies. I am so honored today to bring you a fantastic guest. She is amazing. Dr. Sogol Pahlavan is a pediatrician. She's a podcaster like myself. She's also a mama and a wonderful mindfulness coach. And we haven't talked about this yet, this sort of concept of being a mindful parent. And I think this is really important for women who have children, but also women who are thinking of having children, on how to kind of get your brain in the right mind frame so that you can be more effective as a parent and be more effective as just a human being. Mindfulness is good for all things. So thank you very much for agreeing to come on and chat with me.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure. I'm so excited. I love mindful parenting.
I didn't mention, but what is the name of your podcast again?
Okay, it's Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol.
Perfect. So tell us about yourself. Just tell us where you started from and how you decided to go in this realm from being a pediatrician.
Yeah, so I'm a board certified pediatrician. I grew up in Houston and I did most of my training here and kind of an hour away here and there, but came back home. And I have my own practice. It's in a kind of underserved area, in a Hispanic underserved community. And I love that community. Not many resources out there. So you are kind of bearing all the, you're the psychologist and the social worker and the physician and everything else that comes with that space. I practice with my sister. She's also a pediatrician. And so that's been super fun. I have 3 kids. They're now teenagers, 12, 14, and 16. So I know all about the baby years up to the toddler years, up to the teenage years. And so a year ago, I got certified as mindfulness coach. And the reason I did that is because if you've had other physicians or you yourself, or if you're just kind of hearing what's going on in the physician community and with COVID, there's a lot of burnout, and burnout can look different ways to different people. And you don't necessarily have to be a physician to have burnout. I think there's burnout per se across the board in our society, whether you're a mother or an attorney or a physician or any other human being. We are all at this point where we are burnt out. And so I reached, and my burnout looked like I was just tired. I was tired 24 hours a day. I was dragging out of bed. I didn't know what was wrong with me. That happened about 4 years ago, and it took me a good 4 years to understand what it was after doing all the medical diagnosis that came out all negative, the workup. And it ended up being just this emotional and mental toll that I had been carrying for so many years and not realizing what that was causing to my body. And so that's why I started on my journey of kind of mindfulness and understanding what it is. And I loved it so much, and it's transformed my life so much that I really wanted to give back, because I don't want anyone to be in that space that I was a couple of years ago. And like you had said, I'm so excited about these podcasts and YouTubes and physicians going out there and just sharing their story, right? And by sharing their story, you allow other people to connect with you and come out of the woodworks and just acknowledge that it's okay to feel like this, or it's okay to have these challenges, that you're not the only one out there. I think that's the beauty of having this community built in this community.
You said something so critical there, was that I think COVID has taught all of us about connection. We became so disconnected because we all had to sit in our house for a year and a half, or some people are still continuing to do that we almost craved connection. And that's exactly what you're saying, is we became where we need to actually support each other and connect with each other, as opposed to trying to figure out how to fix our own island.
And I think the connection, the most important thing I learned in that space, in that connection space, is that you cannot connect with others. And this is where mindfulness comes in, unless you're connected with yourself. And so that is what I really want the audience to understand. And that's what mindfulness is. Mindfulness can mean a lot of different things to different people. And for years, back when I was like, my mom used to talk about mindfulness, and I was like, oh, that's like sitting on top of a hill like a guru and meditating. I don't have time for that, right? Or doing yoga or whatever. I don't have time for that. But mindfulness is, if I could describe it in like one sentence or even 2 words, is like being aware of those thoughts inside your head, right? That noise or that mental chatter that we all have 24 hours a day. Sometimes it's super loud and sometimes it's very calm. Sometimes it's nice and sometimes it's not so nice. And then being aware of your feelings, which has been, I think, one of the hardest things just working with physicians and working through the coaching community, is that we're very cerebral, like humans just want to think and we want to fix and we want to go to the solution. And we neglect what's going on in our body. So mindfulness means knowing what's in your head, knowing what's in your body, and connecting those. And then trying to work through it to see what are the thoughts that are causing this? Why am I feeling like this? Can I do something? But the first step is just being aware that of those patterns, of those beliefs, of those feelings, because the fatigue that I was carrying, for me, my feelings came in anger, frustration, and irritability, and everybody could feel it, right? Whether that was my children, my staff, my spouse. And I was kind of in denial. I was like, oh, it's your fault. It's this fault. It's not. Like at some point we have to take responsibility for the way that our body is. And it's not like it's your problem or your fault. It's like, what is my body trying to tell me? Right? Let's tune in, because your body does speak to you just like your mind speaks to you. So let's hear it out. Which is the same kind of like when your teenager screams at you, okay? Mm-hmm. They don't mean to scream because they hate you and whatever. It's, what is my teenager trying to tell me, right? Instead of coming in from like a defensive mode, like, oh, you're so ungrateful and I've done all this stuff to you and you're yelling at me. Like, no, let's go in the space of the teenager and see, okay, what's their day like? What's going on? What are their thoughts? What are their feelings? And connecting with that. But you can't make that connection unless you connect with yourself. So that's where the first step starts.
Yeah, and that is so key to parenting, is understanding it with your child. It's not about you. It's about something that that you got to figure out. It's problem solving all the time, right? So that actually segues beautiful into sort of mindful parenting, which we were going to talk about today, which is how to understand your kids a little bit different. It's not literal, like they're throwing themselves on the ground because they don't have a chicken nugget. It's probably something else. It's just understanding that. And I think you probably have some great tools for parents to start to figure out, maybe this is something I need to know about.
Yeah. I will say again, I always say this, your biggest teacher, your wisest teachers in life are your children. Like each children, I have 3 children and they each teach me a different thing because they have a different personality altogether, right? Mm-hmm. And so just going in with that mindset and saying, instead of being very reactive to what they say, pausing and being like, what is this situation trying to teach me? Instead of like going to like, wow, 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 like very emotional about whatever, right? What if the toddler's reacting like this, what, and you can't sometimes, most of the time you can't do this in the heat of the moment, right? It takes a lot of practice to pause in that heat of the moment. So don't beat yourself up if you're like, oh, I know how to do this. And then the toddler screams and then you start screaming with it. That's like totally normal. Unless you've been doing this for like years, and then you can kind of pause. So awareness is always retroactive, right? You always look back and then you pause, you look back and you see, oh, Let's go over it and see what happened. And we teach that with parents all the time. We said, if your kid is having a temper tantrum, you can't sit the kid down in the middle of the temper tantrum and be like, we don't, eat ice cream before bedtime because it ruins our teeth or whatever, right? You allow them to have the temper tantrum, you leave them alone, and then it might not even be the same day, maybe the next day or next week, when they're coloring or when they're happy or when you're playing on the playground and you say, hey, remember how you wanted to eat ice cream before bedtime? Let's talk about it, right? Same thing that you need to do with yourself, and the way that you talk with yourself is to pause and be aware, but don't do that in the middle of the chaos. Like, give yourself some grace. If you have to yell, that's okay. You can yell. But at least now, instead of yelling and going about your day, you're yelling, but then you have a time where you pause and you go back and you rewind and you see what went on in that day. The other thing that's really helped me is just with kids of all ages, especially teenagers or the preteens, they don't want your advice. They don't want you to talk. They want you to listen. So that is something that you can work on. It's been super hard for me because I'm a talker, and we as physicians are like solution solvers, right? We want to fix things. So when the teen or the preteen, the kid comes to you and they're like, oh, I had such a horrible day, or Jenny was so mean to me or whatever. Okay, let's fix it. What happened? No, just there's two sentences I use. I say, I hear, and then I insert whatever they're saying, right? So if it's like, Jenny's so mean, she didn't invite me to the party, right? I don't say like, oh my God, who's Jenny? Who's her mom? Let me go talk to her. And when is the party? No. A lot of the times they just want, their home is considered their safe space, right? So they just want to vent. They just want to talk, and they don't want you to talk back. They don't want your advice. They just want you to hear them, right? And so and then you can't hear them in silence, right? Because then they're like, oh, you're ignoring me. Are you not listening to me? Why aren't you mating? So eye contact is very important. Getting on their level is very important. Pausing what you're doing if you're cooking and they walk in, and don't continue to cook. Pause. Put this same stuff that you do with your patients, right? You pause, you make eye contact, and then you hear them out, and then you acknowledge them. So I see or I hear that Jenny didn't invite you to the party. That's all you have to say. You just repeat what they say. It's super easy. And then they'll go about saying something else. And then you say, oh, I hear that you are upset because Jenny didn't invite you to your party. So I use those two sentences very often. I see and I hear. So I see you and I hear you. And that gives a message of acknowledgement, right? And attunement, instead of just brushing them off. So that for teenagers, preteens is the connection that they're looking for. They're not looking for you to save the day or to give them any other kind of advice. Sometimes I will ask them, like, I hear, Jenny, I hear you're upset because Jenny didn't invite you to the party. Would you like me to help? Right? Or what would you like me to do? Do you need my help? Like, ask them before you offer it. Don't just give whatever your experience is, which they're not looking for most of the time. Like 90% of the time, they don't want your help. They just want you to hear them and be like, oh, okay, I hear that Jenny didn't invite you to your party and that makes you feel sad. That's it.
Those are fantastic insights. I mean, those are things that I am right now have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. So I'm writing that little portion, and then very different personality children. Like, one's very introverted and quiet, rarely says anything. The other one is the complete opposite. Mm-hmm. And so that works great for both of them, because I do find sometimes that we do want to solve, as moms and physicians, we want to solve everything in 15 minutes or less, right? You came in, we're giving you the solution, you're going, done, visit over. And so it's hard not to sort of realize that they probably don't care about my solution. And then B, it's probably not the right one for them, because what works for me is not likely to work for two boys, right? And just in general, because it's not the same feelings they went through in the same life circumstances. So yeah, I think those are powerful tips to help people with kids and with teenagers, especially, because that seems to be the 2-year-olds and teenagers seem to be right, the stressful, which they can be very similar groups in a lot of ways. They act very similar in very ways. One thing, when you were talking, I was thinking to myself, when you said, not in the moment, but go back. Mm-hmm. Do you think as a parent, there should be sort of times that you should check in with yourself on those things? Or it should be like, okay, a day later, I should always do this?
Yes, I love that you brought up, because since my journey into mindfulness, the first tool that I started with, which allows you to like pause, is, okay, so how do you do that? Like, people are like, okay, like, when do I pause? Like, I don't even have time. Like, I'm working and then I don't even have time to pee or whatever. I am a huge proponent of journaling, because there is something that happens when you actually put a pen to paper and start writing, rather than like just, thinking in your head out loud, right? Or thinking inside your head. And a lot of my clients give me pushback on this, and it takes them a while to like actually believe me. But once they start doing it, they're like, oh, why didn't I do it any earlier? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I told you to do it on the first session. Yeah. And I understand it's challenging to find time, but what I tell them is the time that you are spending spinning in those thoughts, it's so inefficient. Like, it consumes so much of your energy, right, throughout the day. That's why you probably come home depleted. It's not because you had difficult patients, or because whatever, there was traffic on the road, or because you had to go to a PTA meeting or like some committee meeting or board meeting or something. It's because the way you showed up that day was you were carrying all the baggage from whatever was happening yesterday and last week and last month, and it's all piling on top of each other. And so you're like walking around with like, like either being like 9 months pregnant and like having, like 30 pounds on you, extra pounds, or like carrying like 100 pounds on your shoulder. So journaling allows you to just like dump all that weight out on paper. And the first thing I say, it's like, you don't have to do anything with what you write. The fact that you're actually writing it out releases that energy. And we say this all the time to teenagers. And if you've taken your kids to, the pediatrician and they needed counseling or therapy, 50% of the healing from therapy is you sit there and talk. Right? Like, the therapist doesn't even have the other 50%, then the therapist helps you with the resources and, the two-way dialogue. But 50% of it is just like the outlet, right? Like, let it out somehow. Like, so I journal. I tell kids to sing. They want to sing it out, sing it out. I tell them to paint if they like to paint. Mm-hmm. A lot of them like to doodle and draw. That's fine. Rap, like, do whatever. Like, in any way to kind of an outlet, like to get that energy, those thoughts out of your head onto something else. And it should not be onto your partner or your staff or your child, which is what we're used to, right? We're going about our day, and it's like, and if you really think about what triggers you in the moment and you go back and reflect, you're like, oh, that, like, I don't understand why my reaction was so out of range to whatever they did, right? Mm-hmm. And out of range because you're carrying that unresolved emotions and unresolved thoughts over the years, and then you just explode. That's what happens. And you end up exploding. And so that's what I used to do. I lived in like the chaos in our home, the level when the kids were smaller. Once my oldest is very much like me. She's like very opinionated and type A and outgoing and doesn't want anyone to tell her anything. And so we butted heads for literally 10 years. And then I was like, we've got to do something about this. Like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
So taking the time to get all that out of your system. So, and what I do, like I tell parents, like my sanctuary when my kids were smaller was bathroom. You have 5 minutes in the bathroom to pee, hopefully. If you don't, please put a sign out there and lock it and say, I got to pee. Like, that's your right, right? So you could do that. In your car, like in carpool, usually we spend a lot of time in carpool, or going from work back in work right before like you actually come into the garage. Just park outside, or right after you get out of work, just pause for 10 minutes around there and just write down what your thoughts have been. Pick a specific thought that keeps coming up over and over and over and making you feel a certain way. Just write it down. Like, what is this thought? What am I thinking? How is it making me feel? How do I show up when I think of this thought, right? So for me, a common thought about my parenting was like, the kids don't appreciate me, which is a very common thought for all parents, right?
Yes.
Kids don't appreciate me. Okay, if you have that thought, that's not a fact, right? That is a complete thought. Like if you put 10 kids or 10 people in front of you and you ask them, do you appreciate me? Maybe 7 out of 10 will say yes, but it's never like 10 out of 10, right? It's a fact. It's an opinion. And so how do you show up when you keep thinking, kids don't appreciate me, kids don't appreciate me, okay, you don't feel very good, right? You don't feel very empowered. You don't feel like an awesome mom. So how can we change that conversation, right? And it's an inner conversation. How can we change it? Those are the things that you're looking for. Like when you identify the thought, then you say like, how is this thought serving me? Always question it, because be like, is it true? Is it really true that they don't appreciate me? Because your brain offers you thoughts. Those thoughts, 80 to 85% of those thoughts are negative and repetitive and based on past experiences. Okay. So you have that 15%, which that's why we talk about like thinking consciously or thinking with your parent brain or your prefrontal cortex, which is the front part of your brain, which is like pausing and consciously thinking about it, is tapping into that 15% and being like, hey, I know 85% of the time my brain is telling me the kids don't appreciate me, but I bet if I really sit down and think about it, that 15% of the time, I can find evidence where they actually sometimes tell me like, oh, you're so awesome, mom, right? But your brain doesn't want to think about that. It always wants to go to the negative stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what you do when you pause and you journal, is you activate that 15% of your brain, and you have to like consciously, it doesn't come natural. It doesn't. We all live on autopilot, and autopilot is negative repetitive thoughts. So pausing and journaling taps into that 15%. And then as you do it more, then you build up the muscle. And then that's 85% gets smaller because you're building more stamina, and that's 15% gets larger.
Just like training for a race, right? The more you practice, the better you get, the easier it is, as opposed to the first time you go run 2 miles and you think you're going to die.
Yes.
And I think what you said too is really important, because even learning, right? There's so much good data that supports people learn by writing things. They hear it, they write it down. They hear it or see it, they write it down. Like it connects. It's a connection between a motor function and your brain function. And it does help people kind of learn better. So you're kind of learning or retraining yourself as well.
Yeah. I call it reparenting your toddler brain. So your brain is divided into 3 parts, and I call it your teenager, your toddler, your teenager, your parent brain. Your toddler brain is like your primitive old evolutionary brain. Okay. That's the one where you're on autopilot. And that's the one where all of us, if you're not conscious and mindful, you're sitting in that space. And your toddler brain is like your toddler. So everybody can relate to that, right?
Yes.
It's controlling, it wants to tell you what to do. It's not flexible, like all of that. Your teenage brain is the midbrain, the middle part of your brain, which is your amygdala. And it creates your feelings. Okay. And then your parent brain is your conscious part. That's the mindful part that you want to, it's the CEO, it's the executive. So you want to listen to your parent brain because that's like the actual parent. Just like in a family, the parent is the one that you should listen to, right? And so what's happening in your brain is that you're taught, like if you're driving the car, okay, think of your teenager that doesn't have a license yet. So they're like, I don't know, like 15, 14, 15, sitting at the driver's wheel, and your toddler is sitting in the passenger. And the parent is like muted and like handcuffed and like muzzled back in the trunk. So they're not even in the car. Okay. No directions from the parent. And the toddler has like the GPS, or right, they have the Google map or whatever. And they're giving directions to your teenager. And then your teenager is driving down this road called life. So you're being controlled by your toddler brain, and your emotions are being created by your teenager, and your parent is like gone. Like they're not even in the picture. So would you ever allow your toddler and your teenager to like dictate what you do in life, right? No, but we do that all the time with ourselves. That's why the work really starts with you and really understanding that, what I call it, the inner family, which is the one that's sitting in your brain, understanding what is my toddler feeding me every day? What are those thoughts? And what kind of feelings is that causing my teenager, right? Mm-hmm. And where's my parent? Was my parent activated? Like, did I ask it any questions today? Did she come into the house? Is she vacationing? Is she in prison? Like, where is it? And like, that's when I work with my clients, I work with that relationships. That's the first thing that we work with. And then we go down to our body, and then we delve a lot down to our soul. But that's like parenting 103, not 101.
Yeah, and this stuff all affects your relationships with other people, right? The more that you are mindful as a parent, the better off when you go to work and you have that coworker that you think doesn't like you, that one time ate your spaghetti in the refrigerator, that you have these thoughts about how they must not like you and it must be this and that. And so you continue to kind of do that same spiraling effect that happens with parenting as well. And those are different between the facts, like thoughts and facts. So I think what you're saying is critical for women who just maybe want to improve their relationship at work with their coworkers, or their relationship with their boss, or knowing they may have a boss they don't really like, but they're going to have to deal with. So how do you change your thoughts around how to work with someone? I think this can basically help in so many areas of your life.
Yeah. And then don't forget your relationship with yourself. Like, how many thoughts do we have throughout the day about ourselves? A lot, right? Most of our thoughts are, especially when we're alone and we're not, interacting with anyone else, it's about ourselves, right? And when we're trying to set goals, when we're trying to do something new, when we're trying to make a big decision in our lives, right? All those thoughts that have been, and a lot of them are sneaky thoughts, the common ones. And this is why you journal, because the common ones you'll get in your journaling at the beginning. But if you allow your brain, you don't filter anything and you don't get offended by whatever your hand is writing. So don't hold back. If you hold back, it doesn't work. You start writing, then you'll start getting into the deeper thoughts. I remember sometimes I would journal and I'd be like, God, is my brain thinking that? Are you serious?
Yeah. Yes. It's hard to be honest with yourself.
It's so hard, but it's so important. And I will tell you, like you said, your relationships with others, like, as I reconnected with myself, as I really dug through all these like thoughts and beliefs that I had with myself, and started questioning it and working towards like pivoting to kinder beliefs or softer beliefs, my energy level changed so dramatically. And so I believe in like energy, like you have the universe, we're all living here, we're all made out of energy, we're atoms, and that's how we come about. So as your energy level, as that vibration gets higher, then like your kids just automatically gravitate towards you. It's like, it's literally magic. Like I don't have to do anything. The other day, a couple of weeks ago, my 16-year-old was like, hey, you want to go out and have dinner on a Friday night? And I was like, why? Where are your friends?
Yeah.
Right. But they feel it, like when you feel good about yourself, you give off that energy. And so your kids are so much in tune with their feeling. They're so much more grounded. Like adults build a lot of walls. So we're just working through all these obstacles in our life, and we're not free and we're not creative as much as our kids are. So when the kids feel your energy so much more, so when they feel that energy, they're like, oh, it feels good. Like mom feels good. Let me be beside her, right? Versus where I was living in this like anger and yelling and chaos and, resentment energy. It's very much different than like calm. My intentions when I started 15 months ago is I wanted to be calm, ease, and patient. And that's what I'm kind of working towards. So as parents, set an intention. And when I set intentions, I do like one intention. And for me, the first intention was calm. For you, it can be whatever you want it to be, but stick to that intention and really work on it. I don't do like daily intentions. Like today I want to be kind. And then tomorrow I'm like, I look at my entire like life and I'm like, how do I want to be most of the time? What do I want to focus on? And for me, it was calm because I was like, oh, I was like this.
Yeah.
So, and still 15 months in, I'm still like, I'm not calm like a Buddha, like 24 hours a day, but that's the beauty of it. It's an ongoing journey that you work on every day, and every day you make a baby step, and those baby steps accumulate and they make a huge difference.
Yeah, journaling is a tool that I use a lot in my health coaching business, especially with health goals, because a lot of times you can't just say, I want to feel better, right? It's hard. Like writing it down is so much more effective to say, okay, I had a bad day. What is the component that may have made that bad day? Was it because I messed up and ate McDonald's? Was it because I didn't work out? Was it because I just had bad thoughts about my weight all day? Like, what is it that we're doing? Journaling can be a powerful tool for health and wellness across the board, because you kind of forget. We have really short-term memories, right? Mm-hmm. I can't remember what I ate yesterday for lunch. And so it's hard to remember like, oh, I had a good day a week ago. What happened? What did I do? What was I thinking? What was the difference? And so writing those things down is so powerful to be able to go back and go, oh yeah, I spent 10 minutes meditating that day. That's why I had a good day. Or my 16-year-old wanted to hang out with me, or, like something that sort of contributed to that. I think journaling is so key to health, and we don't spend a lot of time as physicians talking to patients about that. And that really is something that could benefit everybody with every illness that we're talking about.
And it's free, right? It's like, it doesn't cost it. And it's so funny because my clients will be like, okay, so what do I use to journal? And I'm like, paper and a pen. Like it doesn't have to, because your brain makes things so complicated. I was like, I literally, when I started, I went into like the art room and I opened the drawers and I got out, like my son had a notebook that had a basketball on it and he'd written some stuff in it, but there were a lot of pages. And I was like, okay, that's my journal. And I just grabbed a pen. Everybody has a pen or pencil, right? Don't make it complicated. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be pretty, whatever, later down. If that's what makes you feel good, fine. But like, just get started, like do it. The first step is doing it, or get some like loose leaf paper or whatever, anything, right on the back of something. You're not turning it in for a grade.
Yeah, 5 minutes a day, literally 5 minutes a day will change so much. I talk about that at the beginning of the day too. I often will do it at the beginning of the day and sort of set the intention for the day, or try to see if I can meet what I think my intention is going to be for that day. So it could be as simple as 5 minutes a day, just spending time writing those things down, your thoughts, or maybe you had a difficult situation with your child and you want to sort of write it down and say, how can I go back and think about what happened, as opposed to just reacting?
Yeah, I'm not a morning person. So when I started journaling, and I still do it. I do it at nighttime after like dinner and stuff like that, because I don't have to do it. The kids are older, so I don't have to do, bedtime routine, stuff like that. But the important thing is like, do it whenever you can. Like start off doing it sometime, right? Do it and whenever you can. And then as you fall into it and it becomes a habit, like after 15 months, I can't not journal. Like it's like brushing my teeth. Like my body like craves it. My mind is like, okay, well, you haven't written anything down today. So it's that first step that's always the hardest. And even like if you sit down, you got your pen and you got your paper, and the first week maybe nothing will come to mind, that's okay. Like sit there. Just the fact that you're sitting and you have your hand on your paper, you just write your name, write the date, whatever, just write whatever you want. Like there's no rules, as long as you start getting used to the pattern of doing it and showing up for yourself. And then when you show up for yourself, you feel good. Like your body feels good about you, because it's like, oh, I actually took 5 minutes out of the day to say that I am important. Right. And then when you feel good, then you give good, right? You share good. When you feel yucky about yourself, when you feel angry, and when you feel resentful, and when you feel stressed or worried or anxious, that is the energy that you give to people. Those are the words, your words that you choose to talk to people come from that anger and resentment and worry and stress, right? Your physical, the way that your body language changes. I mean, there's so many things that change depending on your mood, or the way that all your feelings come from your thoughts. So it's like the place to start. It's like really looking up here and seeing what's going on up here.
So do you have your podcast, do you go over these tips that will help people kind of get started? Because for most people, I think, I mean, myself as well, 2 years ago, I was like, mindfulness, what the heck does that mean? Like, sure, I'm mindful of blah, 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 but it's not the same thing. So where can people find you, and what kind of resources do you suggest that they go to or start with, or just kind of give us your next step?
Yeah. So my podcast, the way I have created it is I'm just sharing my story as I am going along my mindfulness journey. So and I try to be as vulnerable as possible, because that's one of my thoughts that I'm working on, because I thought vulnerability is weakness, which it's not. It's actually strength and courage. So I'm using it as my podcast to kind of shift between, from that thought to the other one. And I give all my coaching tips like through my podcast. So if you start, the first one is my story, and then it goes up and it builds about like your thoughts. And I talk a lot. And since I'm a pediatrician, I feel like I talk on that level, right? I'm not very intellectual with like big words. I talk on the level of like high school level, or even sometimes middle school level. I try to like really relate, because that's how I've been trained to talk, like to my patients and my parents. And so I feel like it's super relatable. It's not obscure or like spiritual or woo-woo or anything like that. It's very like tangible. And then at the end of my podcast, I always give pause practices, which is something that you can add to your journal. So I give a topic, I talk about it. I give a lot of examples of in my life, or just examples of other things that I've seen. And then I give pause practices. So if you're interested in that journey, but you have to do the work. You can't just listen. It won't, it's not magic. It's not just going to like absorb and like, transform your life. You actually have to do the pause practices. And when you do, it's transformative. Like if I can do it, then anybody can do it, is what I say.
That's amazing. I so appreciate that you're bringing this to women and to parents in general, because this is something that we as physicians don't do in a clinical setting. And so it's great when I see physicians who are expanding what they can teach patients and help them at home, right?
Yeah. And this is all, my mission is just to educate if it's even one person. If I can help, then that's all worth it for me, because it is definitely doable. And if you do prioritize your time and give it, like you said, 5 minutes, give yourself 5 minutes a day, y'all. Everybody is worth 5 minutes a day. Come on.
That is true. That is true. Well, thank you so much for everything that you brought today. It was amazing. And I've learned so much myself. And I'm going to definitely be listening to your podcast so I can get these tips for my own parenting, skills. Because gosh, no, like you said, they teach you, each one of them teach you something different constantly. So I appreciate it. And you can also be found on Instagram and Facebook as well, right?
Yes, it's Mindful Living with Dr. Sogol, and that's my podcast too.
Perfect. So I will, when this episode is aired, I will put that in the bottom. So look for the show notes for your links to your podcast as well as your social media. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much. It was so fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm going to end this live and then I'll just chat with you for a minute after. Okay.